Hello and good afternoon. My name is Greg Niemeyer. I'm a professor at UC Berkeley, and we're teaching a course called Visual Cultures. And this portion of the course is public, thanks to the support from Shannon Jackson and Arts and Design at Berkeley, and also the College of Letters and Sciences. Today, my special pleasure is to welcome Gene Luen Yang, who is the author of many fabulous comic books we and our kids grew up with, and we're really thrilled to hear from him today about character development aesthetics. So I'm going to introduce a few more participants. I want to thank Paris Kotz for organizing the event and supporting the series altogether, and also Edgar Fabian Frias and Hala Kadura, who are going to join us shortly, for their support for the course as graduate student instructors. They're MFA students at UC Berkeley, and part of their work here involves doing the graduate student instruction for this course, and meaning that they're running sections, but also meaning that they're going to handle your Q&A today. So if you have any questions, please write them down in the Q&A. And at the end of the talk, when Gene turns it over to participant conversation, Edgar and Hala will share the questions with Gene, and he will answer directly. I also want to acknowledge Aberdeen, who's our closed captioner and is providing the live closed caption for us today. And it's an important part of what we do to make sure everybody can follow and everybody feels included. Thank you so much for doing that. So there's going to be a live chat as well, which I will monitor. So if you have any comments or concerns or ideas, please use the chat to jump in, and sometimes we have a lively discussion there. Now let me move on to actually introducing our speaker, Gene Luen Yang, the creative mastermind behind American-born Chinese, Avatar, The Last Airbender, Boxers and Saints, and of course the recent Dragon Hoops that came out in March. The renowned cartoonist and graphic novelist Gene Luen Yang, who graduated from Berkeley in 1995 with a degree in computer science, weaves deeply personal and realistic narratives that celebrate ordinary people with extraordinary abilities. Join him for an exploration of the ways image and text can support powerful messages, and a discussion of the origins and development of his distinctive narrative aesthetic. Gene Luen Yang is a recipient of a prestigious MacArthur Genius Fellowship, the Eisner Award, the Publishers Weekly Comics Best Comic of the Year, the San Francisco Chronicle Best Book of the Year, the Best Book Award from the Chinese American Libraries Association, and Amazon.com's Best Graphic Novel Comic of the Year. So many bests, Gene. It's a real honor to have you here. And I understand you're joining us from San Jose, California. Is that right?
I am. Thank you so much, Greg. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. It's good to see you again after, I think, one time you did a talk on campus and we met there, and that was in the 2000s, so much time has passed, and you've done some pretty wonderful things. Please tell us all about it, and tell us a little bit about your experience publishing Dragon Hoops in the middle of a pandemic. How did that turn out?
It was definitely a challenge. So Dragon Hoops is my most recent graphic novel that I both wrote and drew. Some of my books I only write, but this is one where I handle both the writing and the art. And I was supposed to finish it last year, but I kept missing all these deadlines. It came out this March. My publisher spent months planning a book tour for me, a two-week book tour, and we had to cancel it last minute. So since then, I mean, it's just like everybody else. We're scrambling on how to figure out how to do normal-ish things in abnormal ways.
Yes, and during this time, we didn't really talk about this earlier, but during this time, did your work that you're working on right now, did it change somehow, or did you shift your practice? Did you?
Oh yeah.
What was the impact?
Yeah. My daily routine is completely shot, and I'm still trying to figure out what it means to make art during quarantine. I used to use a workspace out. I live in San Jose, but I used to use a workspace in Sunnyvale, but that shut down. And I've been trying to work at home. My wife and I, we have 4 kids. It's always noisy. It's very difficult to find a quiet place in our house. And in some ways, it really does feel like making comics when I was first starting out, when I had a full-time job and I was just trying to fit my work, like my comics work, in the in-between spaces of my life. It feels a lot like that again.
Oh, wow. Yeah. And of course, the four kids are at home the whole time, right?
Yeah,
So,
the four kids are at home all the time. We spend so
okay.
much time together as a family.
Well, that's wonderful. But and thank you for carving out a moment for us here. And please, let's go. Let's hear all about how you became the artist you are today, and how you developed your aesthetic. And we can't wait to hear about all that. And then we'll join you for questions later. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, thank you again for inviting me. It really is an honor and a pleasure to visit UC Berkeley, my old alma mater, even when it's virtually. I'm going to start by telling you how I got started in my career, and then I want to tell you about this program that I'm a part of called Reading Without Walls. So I am a cartoonist. I've been doing this for over 20 years now. Being a cartoonist means I write and draw comic books and graphic novels for a living. So here are some of the comics that I've done during the past 20 years. Now, some of these books, I handle both the writing and the art. That's true for all three of the books at the top. And some of them, I only do the writing. So that's true for the four at the bottom. All of these books that are on the screen right now are in my own worlds, meaning like I made up the stories, I made up the characters, and I just ran, right? But I also do work in other people's worlds and in other people's universes. About 6 or 7 years ago, I got a call from Dark Horse Comics, which is one of the biggest comic book publishers in America, and they offered me the chance to write the graphic novel continuation of Avatar: The Last Airbender, which I think is the best animated show that America has ever produced. It ran on Nickelodeon from 2005 to 2008. And after it went off the air, they decided to do this sequel show called The Legend of Korra. Nickelodeon asked Dark Horse Comics to create a series of graphic novels that would fill in that 70-year gap. When one of the editors at Dark Horse called me up to ask me if I wanted to write these for them, I jumped at the chance. This was a ton of fun. I did the first 5 volumes of those series. They're continuing now with another writer, a woman named Faith Erin Hicks, who's absolutely amazing. I'm a huge fan of her. But I did the first 5 volumes. The first 2 have been reissued in paperback format since quarantine began. This is what they look like. It was great. It was a great gig. My favorite part of this gig is I got to call Mike DiMartino and Brian Konietzko, the 2 animators who created this show. And they totally called me back. It was awesome. It was like, I mean, it's just one of those weird things, right? I watched their show. I totally admired their storytelling technique. And then a few years later, I got to talk to them on the phone. So my most recent project is this one right here. This is Shang-Chi. Shang-Chi is, I think he's probably the most prominent Asian American superhero at this point, at least since his movie got announced. Shang-Chi is part of the Marvel Universe. He debuted in the 1970s. He was kind of like Bruce Lee in the Marvel Universe. And just recently, they announced that they were going to fold his story into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Originally, the Shang-Chi feature film was supposed to debut next year. I think they have delayed it by a year because of the pandemic. But they wanted to have some kind of a graphic novel to be on the shelves when the Shang-Chi movie debuts. So they asked me and an artist named DK Ruan and another artist named Philip Tan to create a 5-issue Shang-Chi miniseries. This has been a ton of fun to work on. It is an almost all Chinese diaspora creative team. So I'm a Chinese American. I'm the writer. The editor is a Chinese American who lives in New York. DK Ruan, one of the artists, is a Chinese Italian. And Philip Tan is a Chinese Filipino. The cover right here is done by Jim Chung. He also designed Shang-Chi's new outfit, and he is a Chinese Australian, I believe. It's been great. It's been great. 5 issues. First 2 issues are already out in the stands. Now, comics and I, we go back. We go way back. I am the son of 2 immigrants. My mom was born in mainland China, my dad in Taiwan. They both came to the United States for graduate school, met, fell in love, got married, and had me. When I was growing up, my parents were both avid storytellers. I think that was their way of connecting me and my brother to the culture that they left. This is true of a lot of immigrant parents, right? A lot of immigrant parents will tell stories from the culture that they left to their children to keep that connection alive within their family. So I grew up with lots of stories. Here are some of the stories that my mom used to read to me when I was about to go to sleep. These are Chinese language storybooks that she asked her parents to send over from Taiwan when I was young. As an adult, I look back on these stories that my mom used to read to me, and I realize how different they are from most of the stories that most kids in America hear at bedtime. Here's an example of what I'm talking about. This is an actual book from my childhood bookshelf. So just in case you can't figure out what's happening on the screen here, there is a young lady who is breastfeeding her own mom. So her own mom has gotten so old, she's lost all of her teeth. This young woman is breastfeeding her own mom to keep her alive, and she's doing this while her toddler is crying in the corner because he's hungry. This was a collection of short stories aimed at little kids, all about filial piety, about respecting and caring for your elders. I'm pretty sure if you go to your local Barnes & Noble, you're not going to find an English translation of this book. Now, of all of my mom's stories, my favorite were of the Monkey King by far. The Monkey King is a Chinese legendary figure. His story was first written down in a novel called Journey to the West about 500 years ago. But scholars believe that his story actually predates that by centuries, that he existed as an oral tradition for a really long time before his story was written down. The Monkey King was my absolute favorite of all of my mom's stories. He is this magic kung fu fighting monkey. What is there not to love about a magic kung fu fighting monkey? But all of these stories, about the Monkey King, and even about that young lady who breastfeeds her own mom, all of these stories sort of fed into my interest in stories and eventually my desire to tell my own stories. Now, in terms of comics really came into my life a little bit later. So I grew up with stories, and I also grew up drawing. The very first storytelling art form that I was interested in was actually animation. When I was very young, when I was in early elementary school, my dream was to work for this guy right here. I wanted to be a Disney animator. In third grade, we had to choose a famous person to write a biography on. And I chose Walt Disney. After that, I got super obsessed with him. I remember looking up in the encyclopedia the date of his death, because I was hoping that Walt Disney's death date would match my birth date, because that would mean that I might be his reincarnation. That didn't work out. We were off by several years, but I was still obsessed with Disney. I remember practicing for hours drawing in that classic Disney style, because I just really wanted to work for the Disney animation studio. Eventually, though, that dream got replaced by comic books, and that happened one night when I was in 5th grade. My mom took me to our local bookstore back in the 80s. Every bookstore had what was called a spinner rack. This was a rack that was made out of wireframe. It would carry a month's worth of comics. You could spin the whole thing so you could see all the comics. My mom took me to this local bookstore. I saw a comic on that spinner rack that I wanted with all of my heart. I brought it home. Superman and the Atomic Knights was the very first comic of my comic book collection. And in this story, the atomic bomb drops. It kills off almost everybody on the planet. Superman and these guys called the Atomic Knights, they're like these superheroes that dress up in medieval style armor and ride around on these atomically mutated dogs to fight crime. They have this adventure together. By the end of the story, it's revealed that the entire issue is just a dream that somebody's having, but that did not stop this issue from just blowing my mind. It freaked me out. I stayed up nights thinking about this story, thinking about Superman and about the Atomic Knights, about the atomic bomb, about mutated dogs, and about comic books, about how this combination of words and pictures was able to do something inside my brain that nothing had ever done before. I mean, one of the things that really fascinated me about this comic was flipping through it and realizing these are just drawings on paper, and I knew how to draw on paper, so it felt like, unlike animation, which was on a screen, comics felt well within my reach. So pretty soon after this, I became an avid comic book collector. even though the very first comic in my collection was a DC comic, I very quickly became a Marvel fan. For whatever reason, when I was a kid, I just thought Marvel was so much cooler than DC. I remember finding out that there was a character called Aqualad in the DC universe, and I just thought, man, like Aqua by itself is really dumb. But when you add the word lad to it, that just doesn't seem like a name that's worthy of a superhero. I was a huge Marvel fan. I also began drawing my own comics. So my best friend in 5th grade was a kid named Jeremy Kunioshi, who was already a veteran comic book geek. He'd been collecting comic books since he learned how to read, like in 1st or 2nd grade. So together, we would sit at the lunch tables at lunchtime and we would come up with stories together. Then I would do all the pencils, he would do all the inks. We would give our original art to his mom, who would photocopy them for us. And then we'd take these photocopies, we'd staple them by hand, and we'd sell them to our friends for 50 cents a piece. We made like $8. It was amazing. That was the beginning of my comic book career.
You still
Jeremy has since, oh, go ahead.
Do you still have any of those comics from that time?
I think I do. I think I have some in a box at my parents' house. I haven't seen them in years though, but I'm almost positive they're somewhere in there. But you know, Jeremy has stopped making comic books. He is now a radiologist. He makes a lot of money. But I kept making comic books. I kept making comics all the way into my adulthood. This right here is the very first comic book that I ever produced as an adult. I self-published it. It's called Gordon Yamamoto and the King of the Geeks. It's about a young man who gets a spaceship stuck in his nose, and he becomes friends with the alien that's living inside that ship. The alien becomes kind of like his life mentor, his Tony Robbins. I have boxes and boxes of this comic at my parents' house. I'm sure of that, because back then, you know, to self-publish, printers required like a print run minimum. So I think it was 3,000 at the time, and I sold maybe 700 of these. So I have like boxes, like a couple thousand of these at my parents' house. But it was fun. It was a great experience self-publishing this. I kept going. I kept making my own comics, self-publishing. Eventually, I got picked up by a publisher called First Second Books. And with them, 10 years after Gordon Yamamoto and the King of the Geeks came out, I put out American Born Chinese, which was my very first full-color graphic novel. The response to American Born Chinese was well beyond anything I could have imagined. It was shocking. You know, the librarians and the teachers and the bookstore owners and the comic book fans that came out to support this book, their support really paved the way for me to become the full-time cartoonist that I am today. So that is my career in a nutshell. American Born Chinese really opened up all sorts of doors of opportunity to me. I've done many, many books now with First Second Books with that same publisher. And I've also gotten to work with DC Comics and Marvel, in part because of the support that American Born Chinese got. Since pandemic began, I've had a few books come out. These are the two most prominent ones. I'd like to tell you about each of these books and sort of what I learned from creating them. So Superman Smashes the Klan, that's actually the second book to come out. It came out in May. It's a book that I only wrote. The art is done by this fabulous Japanese art team called Gurihiru. They're the same team that did these Avatar books. And I believe that they are among the most elite artists working in the world's comic market today. They are absolutely fabulous. Superman Smashes the Klan is actually a retelling of an old Superman story from the 1940s. So back then, Superman had the most popular radio show in America. And on his radio show, in 1946, a year after World War II ended, he actually took on a group of hooded and robed racists that called themselves the Klan of the Fiery Cross. They were very obviously stand-ins for the real-life Ku Klux Klan. I first read about this storyline. It's called the Klan of the Fiery Cross storyline. I first read about it in that book Freakonomics, and ever since then, I've been fascinated with it. I'm fascinated for two reasons. One is that supposedly this 16-part storyline that ran on a children's radio show in 1946 actually had a real-life effect on the real-life Ku Klux Klan. Supposedly, after that storyline aired, the real-life Klan saw a tremendous drop in membership. You know, after hearing that these fictional robed and hooded racists were called bigots by this American icon, by Superman, nobody wanted to join their real life counterparts. And I think this was fascinating for me because so often people who are really into geek culture, you know, into superhero movies and superhero comic books, we're accused of having our heads in the clouds, of kind of indulging in escapism, right? And here was an example of a story about a quote unquote escapist hero, about a man who dresses up in blue tights and a red cape. And the story had a real world effect. So it just shows that you can tell fantastical stories that still have an effect on the real world. And the other thing that really fascinated me about this story was at the heart of the conflict, you know, at the center of the conflict was a Chinese American family. So a Chinese American family moves into Metropolis. They, you know, or they basically get targeted by these robed and hooded racists, and Superman leaps into action to defend this Chinese American family. This was fascinating for me because, you know, I've been reading superhero comics since the 5th grade, and I just don't remember that many characters who look like me in those stories. One of the things that Asian Americans really struggle with is this feeling of, or this perception of perpetual foreignness, right? No matter how long our families have been here, we are often seen as foreigners here in America simply because of the way we look. So here was this family of Chinese Americans who date back to 1946. That is practically the beginning of Superman, of this American icon. Finding out that a Chinese American family played such a prominent role, such a pivotal role in such an important story in the Superman mythos, it gave me this like feeling of affirmation, you know, like we have always been here. Asian Americans have always been here, even if we weren't acknowledged. One of the big differences between that original radio show and Guri Hiru's and and my adaptation of it is that we give that Asian American family a much more prominent place. So in the original radio show, they show up in the first few episodes, but by the end, they pretty much disappeared in the background. In our version, they play a central role from beginning to end. When I look back on my childhood fascination with Superman and with superhero comics in general, I wonder if I was so fascinated because I am the son of immigrants. Superman was actually created by two sons of immigrants. Joe Shuster and Jerry Siegel were the children of Jewish immigrants from Europe. Now, I don't know if they meant to do this, but they definitely put pieces of their own cultural heritage into the story that they're telling. So let me give you a couple of examples of this. Superman's origin story is one of the most famous in the world. You all know it, right? So as an infant, he is placed into this rocket ship. It's like this little metal basket, and he's launched into space to save him from doom. That is pretty much a science fiction retelling of a story from the Hebrew scriptures, the story of Moses, who as an infant is placed into a basket of reeds, launched into space to save him from doom. Superman is a hero with superhuman strength, but there is something that saps him of all of his strength, and in his case, it's a glowing green rock called kryptonite. This mirrors another story from the Hebrew scriptures, the story of Samson, who is also a hero with superhuman strength. He also has a critical weakness that saps him of all of his strength, and in his case, it's haircuts. The central reality of Superman's life is that he has to navigate between two different identities and two different cultures. He is both an American and a Kryptonian, and most of the time, he actually has to hide his cultural heritage. He has to hide the fact that he's from another planet that he's from another culture, he's from another place. This mirrors the daily existence of Siegel and Schuster and all of their Jewish friends and family, both here in the United States and especially in Europe. Remember when Superman was getting started in the late 1930s and early 1940s, so was World War II. So I think they really drew on their own experiences as Jewish Americans to create this dynamic of the secret identity that is so central to the superhero genre. And that dynamic made a lot of sense to me, you know? Like Superman, I also had two names. I had a Chinese name that I used at home and an American name that I used at school. I spoke two different languages. I spoke Mandarin at home and English at school. I lived under two different sets of cultural expectations. I knew as a child of immigrants what it was like to have a secret identity. So in a lot of ways, I feel like these superhero stories that I read as a kid, they acted as mirrors to me. They reflected at least parts of my own experience back to me. You know, however imperfectly, that reflection was there. And by doing that, they really showed me that what I was going through was important, that it was story worthy, and other people had gone through those same emotional realities. So that is Superman. That's Superman Smashes the Klan. That's one of the books that came out during pandemic. The other book that came out was Dragon Hoops. This is the longest single volume that I have written and illustrated. It clocked in at 440 pages. I wrote and drew it, but it's colored by a good friend of mine named Lark Pien, and this came out right at the beginning of pandemic. It was a mad scramble, like I told Greg, to figure out what to do. But I have to tell you, I never in a million years would have guessed that I would have spent. This took me 5 years to write and draw. I never would have guessed I would have spent 5 years writing and drawing a book about basketball, because I am not a basketball fan. You probably can't tell from looking at me through the screen, but if we were together in real life, you'd be able to see, oh, this dude is not an athlete. I was not an athlete as a kid. On the basketball court, I had a really hard time paying attention to the game. Almost always, whenever I attempted to play basketball, I would get hurt. I'd either get my fingers jammed or I'd get my feelings hurt because some other player would say something really mean to me. So pretty early on, I learned I had to keep a wall between me and basketball just to keep from getting hurt. And as you all know, these walls that we put up as kids, they stay with us even after we become adults. You know, they stay with us even after we become teachers. I was actually a teacher for a very long time. I was a high school teacher at Bishop O'Dowd High School in Oakland, California, not too far from the UC Berkeley campus. I was there for 17 years. I taught computer science there. And here is what our campus looked like. Here is a drawing of our campus. And here is a drawing of what the Bishop O'Dowd faculty lunchroom looked like. So in that faculty lunchroom, all of the PE teachers sat at one table, all of the drama teachers sat at another, and all of the nerdy teachers sat at another. I, of course, sat with the nerdy teachers. Now, to be fair, there were some teachers that would go from one table to the other, but most of us stayed where we were most comfortable. We stayed inside of our walls. Every now and then, though, something happens to get us to move outside of our walls, right? And for me, books played a really key role. So as a Chinese American, one of the things I love reading about most is Chinese American history. One day, I came across this book right here. It's called Outside the Paint. This is a nonfiction book about the basketball scene in 1940s and 50s San Francisco Chinatown. Before coming across this book, I had no idea there was a basketball scene in 1940s and 50s San Francisco Chinatown. This is written by Kathleen Yep, who is the niece of a very prominent children's book author by the name of Lawrence Yep. And in this book, Kathleen Yep is able to capture these voices that I think otherwise would have been lost to history, right? What she discovers is that in the 40s and 50s, these poor immigrants of these poor children of Chinese immigrants really didn't have much to do for fun. There were these two basketball courts right in the middle of San Francisco Chinatown. And all the kids in the neighborhood, both the girls and the boys, spent as much time as they could on these two basketball courts. They played so much basketball that they got super good at it. And during the 40s and 50s, the youth leagues in San Francisco were all dominated by these Chinatown teams. These Chinatown teams were so poor, they could not even afford proper uniforms. So they would play in their street clothes, but they still dominated. This book was a lot of fun. It really showed me a glimpse of a piece of Chinese American history that I knew nothing about. And it was definitely about something that was inside my walls. It was about Chinese American culture. It was about Chinese American history. But it was also about this thing that I'd actively avoided since I was a kid. It was about basketball. Well, I enjoyed this book so much that I read other books about basketball. I read Slam Dunk, one of the most popular manga series on the planet, about a Japanese high school basketball team chasing after the national championship. I read Matt De La Pena's Ball Don't Lie. Matt De La Pena is one of our most prominent children's book authors right now. He was also a basketball player. He played college ball all the way through his senior year. He went up against Steve Nash. That's how good he was. And in Ball Don't Lie, he explores being biracial through the lens of sports. Crossover is a Newbery Award winner. It's done by Kwame Alexander, another celebrated children's book author. This is a book told in verse. So I think the most extraordinary thing about this book is Kwame Alexander is able to capture the rhythm of a game of basketball using the rhythm of words. All of these books together acted as a window for me. They gave me a glimpse into something that I knew nothing about, the culture of basketball, something that I had actively avoided since I was a kid. And because I read these books, I had all these like newbie, beginner questions about basketball. I wanted to find somebody to ask these questions to, so I found this guy right here. His name is Lou Ritchie. He is a teacher at Bishop O'Dowd High School. He is also the head coach of the varsity men's team. Here's what he looks like in the yearbook. Here's what he looks like as a cartoon. Now, Lou and I, we had been on the same campus for over a decade, but we were not friends because we sat at two different tables at lunch. Well, after I sat down with him and started asking my questions, we did start becoming friends. So Lou is this athlete and I am a nerd. We're not supposed to mix. As he answered my questions, we started to like each other. And he asked me to go and watch his team play. So I went. I went first to one game and then another and another. Pretty soon I discovered that I was, following this team for an entire season. Over that season, I got to know not just Lou and his team, but I also got to know the game of basketball. So nowadays, I do consider myself a basketball fan. I am definitely not an expert, though. I still don't totally understand all the rules. I'm glad that fan and expert are two different things. I became pretty good friends with Lou. I discovered that we were not as different as I originally thought. First, just like me, he loves books. He developed a voracious reading habit when he was in college. He loves reading, especially books about history. And he also loves numbers. He had so many sports statistics memorized in his head when he was a kid that the other kids in his neighborhood all called him the professor. So Lou isn't just an athlete. He is also a nerd. He's like this hybrid, right? He's like this nerdly. I have photographic evidence of this. Here's what Lou looked like when he was a kid. Not that different from what I look like. So during this season, this is the 2014-2015 season, I traveled with the team. We went to Missouri and Florida and LA to play in all these different tournaments. I got to sit in on their pep talks. I got to listen to their strategies, and I got to know the story. This was a really amazing story about this team. It's a team of coaches and players, all chasing after the same goal, all chasing after the California State Championship. This story was so compelling that I felt like I had to put it down on paper. And that's really what Dragon Hoops is. Dragon Hoops is the story of the Bishop O'Dowd Dragons, this high school team out of Oakland, California, during the 2014-2015 season, when they were chasing after the California State Championship. the story really begins with Lu. Lu is one of the most fascinating people I know. He's one of the most interesting people I know. He is not just a teacher and a coach at Bishop O'Dowd. He's also an alum. He graduated from Bishop O'Dowd High School in 1989. And when he was a junior, he was a point guard on the varsity basketball team. His team made it all the way to the California State Championship. And that game was played in the Oakland Arena, more recently known as the Oracle Arena, right? It used to be the place where the Warriors played. So this game was the biggest game of 17-year-old Lu Ritchie's life. This was televised. He is on the court with 7 seconds left, and the Bishop O'Dowd Dragons are down by 1. The ball somehow makes it into his hands. He dribbles down that court and he puts it up at the buzzer. The ball goes through the hoop. The Dragons win by 1. Lu freaks out. He's like on that court screaming, jumping up and down. His teammates rush him. His coach runs up to him and hugs him. Everybody's freaking out. And then over the intercom comes the ref's whistle. So the ref invalidates that shot. Supposedly, the center on the Dragons team, a kid named Mike Dones, had his hand on the rim as that ball was falling through the hoop. So it was offensive goaltending. The biggest shot in Lu Ritchie's life gets invalidated. The Dragons end up losing by 1, but Lu never forgets. You know, he's telling me this story in his office. He's like, I don't know, he's like 40 something when he's telling me. It's been 30 years since he took that shot. And you can feel the emotion in his voice as he's telling me the story. He reaches over his desk and he grabs a DVD of that game. He hands it to me. He goes, Yang, you go home and you watch this game. You tell me if that kid's hand was on that rim. So I did. I took it home. I watched it. And I have to tell you, it is hard to tell whether that hand was on that rim. It was a very, very controversial call. Lu never forgets about that shot. He goes on, he plays in college, first for UCLA and then for Clemson. And then this hamstring injury ends his career. He eventually makes his way back to Bishop O'Dowd High School. First as an assistant coach to his old head coach, and then as the head coach himself. He becomes the first African-American head coach in the school's history. As an assistant coach and as a head coach, Lu leads 5 different teams to the California State Championship. So he has these 5 chances to redeem that old hurt from when he was 17 years old. He loses all 5 times. The reason why I wanted to follow, one of the reasons why I wanted to follow him during the 2014-2015 season, one of the reasons why I decided to devote 5 years of my life to telling his story, to telling this story, was because of these 2 kids right here. So if you are a Bears basketball fan, you most likely recognize these 2 young men. This is Ivan Rabb and Paris Austin. They were seniors at Bishop O'Dowd High School during the 2014-2015 school year. And they were the 2 most talented players to come through the men's varsity program in about a generation. So Ivan, after he graduated from Bishop O'Dowd, he played for Cal for 2 years. Then he got drafted into the NBA. And Paris started off at Boise, but then came to Cal, and he finished off his college career at Cal. So he just graduated. And he graduated after a really distinguished career, both academically and athletically at Cal. So with Ivan and Paris on Lu's team, this was Lu's best chance at finally winning that California State Championship, at finally redeeming that old hurt from when he was 17 years old. And I wanted to see if he could do it. I'm not going to tell you if he did or not, because I want you to read the book. But you see, reading those books about basketball led to me having this friendship with Lu, which led to me following his team for a season, which led to me working on a book that is about something that I never had any interest in before. So books as a whole acted as a mirror for me. They gave me a glimpse into something that I knew nothing about basketball. You know, books acted as a window for me. They can act as a window for you as well. They can be a window into other people's cultures, other people's religions, other people's ways of life. They can be windows into subjects that you might not know anything about, or you might even find intimidating, the way I found basketball intimidating. Books can even be windows into other forms of books. Maybe you're somebody who only reads novels for fun and you would never touch a graphic novel with a 10-foot pole. Or maybe you're the exact opposite. Maybe you only read graphic novels for fun and you would never read a book with no pictures unless it was assigned to you in class. Well, there is a growing category of hybrid books that use both comics and prose to tell their story. And these books can really be a window from one publishing format into another. Nowadays, in American comics, in American storytelling in general, I would say, we are having a long and sustained conversation about diversity. I really believe we need diverse books. Throughout this entire presentation, I've been drawing on the ideas of this lady right here. Her name is Dr. Rudine Sims Bishop. She is a professor of children's literature at The Ohio State University. She is the one that came up with this idea of talking about window books and mirror books. Like Dr. Rudine Sims Bishop, I believe every person needs windows and mirrors. Mirrors are stories that reflect pieces of our own experience back to us. By doing that, they tell us that we're not alone. They tell us that what we're going through is important, and they teach us to love ourselves. Window books give us a glimpse into the lives of other people. People who, at least on the surface, might seem very, very different from us. And by doing that, they highlight our common humanity. They teach us to love other people. So I believe that these two things working in conjunction with each other, loving other people the way we love ourselves, that is the foundation of a just and moral society. So that's why I'm a part of this program called the Reading Without Walls program. And it takes the form of a challenge. If you want to do the challenge, either by yourself or as a community, all you got to do is this. You set a due date for yourself. And by the end of that due date, you just do one of three things. One, you read a book about a character who doesn't look like you or live like you. Somebody who, at least on the surface, seems very different from you. Or two, you read a book about a topic that you don't know anything about. Or three, you read a book in a format that you wouldn't normally read for fun. So if normally all you read for fun are prose novels, give a graphic novel a try. If normally all you read for fun are graphic novels, try a book without pictures. Try a collection of poetry, a prose novel, even an audiobook. If you really want to go for the gold, try to find a book that fits all three criteria. This program has been run in schools and libraries and bookstores all over the nation. And what we've been hearing is from teachers, bookstore owners, and librarians is that it's a great way of getting books that don't normally get a lot of attention, more attention. They've done these studies and they found that reading is a great way to increase our own capacity for empathy. And I'm sure you all agree with me, regardless of what you believe politically, right? You all agree with me that when we look at our world today, we need a little bit more empathy. So let's get everybody outside of our walls and see what happens, because I believe what will happen will be amazing. So that is the end of my talk. Thank you again so much for inviting me here. If you all have any questions for me, I would love to answer them.
Wow, thank you so much, Gene. There's a lot of excitement in the chat room and a lot of applause. You really did exactly what we needed today, which is restore our faith and hope in humanity and our own ability to become more human through books. Thank you so much. I will just at this point turn it over to Edgar and Hala, who will present you with a few questions from the audience. And sure. There's really a lot of appreciation in the chat if you want to take a look. Goosebumps, anxiety relieving, so amazing. This was amazing. Thank you. Best webinar ever. And it was really a beautiful and compelling case you made there. I'm very impressed that you were able to start researching something before you even knew that you were going to write a book. So you just sort of felt it sort of converged into dragon hoops.
Yeah. I was actually very freaked out. at that time. So 2013, I had a book come out called Boxers and Saints, which took me 6 years to finish from beginning to end. And after that, I was just really exhausted. Not only was I exhausted, my brain was completely empty of ideas, and I was freaked out about just not having anything else to say. So at that point, we had 4 kids. Comics had become, I was still teaching, but comics had become more and more of an important part of our family's finances, so I was like, I cannot stop making comics until these kids are grown. And then basketball kind of found its way into my life.
Fascinating. Okay, Edgar, Hala, let's take it away. Questions.
Yes, I have a question from someone here in the audience, from Ann Walsh. If you'd like to ask the question that you put in the Q&A section.
Anne, you can speak now. Thanks for joining us today.
I'm still chewing some salad. I wasn't expecting to speak. Gene, that was so great. First of all, I just want to say that was so great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anne.
Yeah. And I just was really remarking on that you had 2 books come out basically in 2020. And one you said was right at the beginning. So obviously that was in the works for a while. But it just made me wonder about the sort of turnaround time for graphic novels and whether that's faster or not than other kinds of publications.
Yeah, it depends. So I didn't mean for 2 books to come out in 2020. Like Dragon Hoops was supposed to come out in 2019. Actually, the original due date for it was supposed to come out in 2018. That's how I missed 3 deadlines for Dragon Hoops. Like by the time that book came out, Paris had practically graduated. He was like a high school kid when I started that book, and he was an adult by the time I was finished. So I didn't mean for that to happen at all. In terms of the turnaround time, it really depends on the publisher. So up until very recently in America, the book world and the comic book world were like 2 completely different markets. They had their own ways of publishing. They had their own distribution channels. They even had their own retailers. And it's only within the last 10 to 15 years that they've kind of converged. But in the book world, it takes about a year. You turn in your book, and a year later it shows up on the shelf. In the comic book world, you turn something in, and usually within 3 months it's on the shelves. So even though like Marvel and DC have moved into graphic novels, they have still kept that process. So Superman Smashes the Klan, I finished after Dragon Hoops, like well after Dragon Hoops. I think a year after Dragon Hoops, but it came out just a couple months after.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for this inspiring. I'm muted or not muted? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, great. Amazing. Thank you so much for this inspiring talk. I think we all needed some inspiration, and we really appreciate your energy also. So thank you. I'm gonna take a question from one of our students, Ileana Koo. Her question is, in your experience, what's the greatest difficulty you faced when illustrating and composing comics? Using Avatar as an example, did you find convening the bodily movements and bending along with the text and dialogue rather difficult?
Yeah. Okay. So the biggest obstacle, I would say, is this voice in my head that tells me that everything I do is garbage. I think a lot of us have that, right? I actually think that people with low self-esteem are drawn to creative arts. I think like if we had really good self-esteem, we'd become like politicians, or like, I don't know, athletes or something, or like business people. But we're drawn to creative arts because there's like something. I think it's like a brokenness. There's like some kind of brokenness inside of us that we're trying to work out. And early on, I just had trouble finishing stuff. I remember being in high school and even in college and wanting to do these projects and getting halfway through and looking at it and thinking, this is all garbage. This is terrible. And I need to start a new idea. So I would always discard things halfway through. But eventually I figured out that voice is lying, usually it's lying. and that if I could just push through it, that at the very end, I could look back and I could have a more accurate assessment of what's good and what's bad, right? It's never as bad as the voice says it is. That's what I found. I mean, it's never awesome, but it's never as bad as the voice says it is. So so learning to push through that, I think, was the most important thing. I also learned that voice is always there. Like, you know, I just had that voice this morning. I was working on my most recent graphic novel and looking at it and feeling like I need to just start over. But in terms of the avatar, in terms of matching the movements with the character's dialogue, so Avatar, it's not like some of the books, like the books that I do for first second books. With first second books, I'm trying to express a voice that originates in my own head. With Avatar, I'm trying to capture a voice that was already expressed in the show. So to prepare for that, I just had that show running constantly for like several months in the background. Anytime, like I was brushing my teeth, I'd have it running in the background and try to get it inside of me. For matching the visuals with the dialogue. So I was just trying to capture the dialogue. For matching the visuals with the dialogue, that really was up to the artist, up to Gurihiru. And that's one of the reasons why I consider them elite artists, is because they are able to do that. You know, they are able to capture the spirit of animation using still pictures.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your honesty and for the inspiration. I'm gonna give it back to Edgar.
Yeah, I fully agree with what Hala just said, Gene. We really appreciate the way that you're bringing yourself into this and like kind of really being vulnerable and honest. I really am feeling the excitement from everyone. So many questions in the Q&A. I wanted to see if the next person, Gabriel Santi, if they wanted to ask their question.
Gabriel, I think you're on. Are you
Hi
with
there,
us?
can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Hi, so yeah, in my comic experience, I've drawn some to ease or to express a wanting for a particular kind of thing to take place, whether that be a sense of belonging or what have you. And I drew something and it was totally sci-fi. It wasn't something that I could really put into words in a one-to-one way. And later in life, it happened to unfold in just the way that I had written it to. Have you had any experiences where you have been in a way kind of laying out a blueprint for things that you hope to happen to have had them happen?
You drew a comic and then like, isn't there a show about that now called Utopia? Isn't there a show about that?
I'm not aware.
Yeah, I think so. I haven't watched it yet, but my comic book friends keep telling me about it. I think there's something, you should watch that show. It might be actually about your life. But I haven't necessarily had that yet. That sounds like I feel like this is what I think you should do. This is as a reader, this is what I would want. I would want you to do a comic about one of your comics predicting something and to show both of those things. You know what I mean? That would be super interesting. That would be super interesting. You should totally do that. And that also reminds me of Mouse by Art Spiegelman, which is it's the first graphic novel to win a Pulitzer Prize. And he does comics about his own life, and then Mouse in some ways is a comic, at least a section of it is a comic about his own life. Right. So I think that's great. I think you should totally work on something like that. I have not had that experience, which is why I would love to read about somebody who did.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gabriel, and thank you, team, for that. Hala, do you have the next question?
Yes, I was just like so into the conversation that I forgot. Okay, so our second question is from our student Jasmine Chen. What is your plot character development process? What are some key elements that you consider when first ideating about a new storyline or character?
Yeah, so usually a character starts for me as a voice that talks in my head, right? And I start writing down dialogue that I hear, and then pretty soon after that, sometimes before, but usually it's in this order. Pretty soon after that, I'll start sketching the character in the sketchbook, even if it's a project that I'm not planning on drawing myself, just to get a sense of who that character is. So usually I'll sketch them over and over again until they start to solidify. Those of you who do a lot of art, you know that like in the beginning, like especially when you're trying to do a character design, in the beginning, the character just shifts a lot, right? It shifts a lot. It's almost like your hand is trying to figure out the most comfortable way of drawing that character, and you have to wait until your hand figures it out before you can move on. So once I get all of that stuff done, when I'm really trying to define the character, what I want is the character's deep need. Like, what is the broken part of them that they want solved, right? Or they want healed, or what is the one thing that they need in order to like be fulfilled, and ultimately, like once that's identified, then everything else can kind of fall into place.
Thank you. Back to Edgar.
Yeah, so I have a question also from one of our students. This is from Guadalupe Orozco Gutierrez, and she asks, do you have any advice for people who are trying to pursue a career in art?
Yeah, and art in general. So I don't know. I only know my own path, right? I only know my own path. So there are definitely people who did not take this path who found success. But in my own path, I think early on when I started in comics in the 90s, the comic book industry was not doing well. So Marvel Comics is not what it is today. Back then, Marvel Comics had just declared bankruptcy. I'd go to these comic book conventions and I would listen to people really like wonder if we were about to see the collapse of American comics. Because the speculation was Marvel had declared bankruptcy. Like there are two kinds of bankruptcy. There's the bankruptcy where you just like, we can't pay our bills. And then there's bankruptcy where like you disappear, right? And there was a real chance that Marvel was going to do that. So if Marvel disappeared in the 90s, it would take down all of the comic book shops in America with it, because the vast majority of comic book shops in America depended on Marvel stock to make their bills. So in that environment, it just didn't seem like making comics was a viable career option. But I still wanted to make comics. So the choice that I made at that point was I was going to find a job that I liked that also would give me enough time and enough energy to pursue comics on the side. And I thought I was going to self-publish. Every time I put out a book, I was planning on losing anywhere from a few hundred to a few $1,000s. But I just figured some people lose money at playing golf. I'm going to lose money by making comic books. So that's kind of how I proceeded, right? So I became a high school computer science teacher. I actually really loved that job. And what it did was it gave me the space to pursue art on the side. I had the summers, I had winter break. And it was also, for me at least, it was from a different energy bucket. I feel like teaching is a very extroverted kind of energy. Making art is a very introverted kind of energy. When I got sick of being around students, I would just go home and work on my comic. When I got sick of being by myself, I could go to school. So it was a very nice balance for me. And I think because I didn't depend on art as the way I fed myself, it kind of gave me a freedom in my art, you know? And I think finding that balance, at least for me, was key to eventually growing as a cartoonist. And I really think that like being able to sign with a publisher, I don't think I would have been able to do that if I had just tried to jump in head first at the very beginning and try to do art full time from the very beginning. That said, though, there are people who have done that. You know, there are people who feel like a full-time job is really distracting. There's no way I can make space for myself to make art. And I got to go all in or it's not going to work.
Thank you so much for that. Yeah, I can really relate to that in many different ways. Thank you, Gene. Do you have the next question, Hala?
Yeah, I'm going to take a question from Sophie in the audience. Sophie, if you're still with us, please, Greg, can you unmute
Sophie McMurdy?
Yes.
Yes, you're on, Sophie.
Maybe I can go ahead and ask the question.
Yeah, please do.
Okay. How do you pick a drawing style for the comic and stick to it? Do you have a reference sheet to ensure that it stays the same?
Yes. That sounds like a question from somebody who's tried to draw comics before. And that's actually one of my big struggles, especially in the beginning, was keeping character consistency. It's not just the beginning. Even now, I like even in Dragon Hoops, I had to redraw some of the faces and stuff because they didn't feel consistent. But I do use model sheets. So model sheets is something that animators use. It's basically a sheet that shows a full figure of a character and then a few of his or her most common facial expressions, and then you keep this taped up by your desk, right, while you're drawing, and you look at it. So over the course of, I mean, a graphic novel can take you several years to finish. Over the course of those years, it really could, your drawing style really could change, and that keeps you from changing. But I have to say, there is an artist by the name of Joan Safar. He is a French cartoonist. My favorite book of his is called The Rabbi's Cat, and he purposely does not stay consistent. Before I read his book, I thought you had to keep your characters consistent in order to have a successful graphic novel. After I read his book, I realized there are ways of doing it where you don't need that consistency, where you could actually actively push against that consistency. Like there are some panels in his books where he will switch media. Like he will draw one panel using pen and ink and another one in watercolor. And his books still read great. So I would say if you want consistency, use a model sheet, but also explore ways of making comics where you use the lack of consistency as a storytelling strength.
With that, we have come to the end of a really enjoyable hour. Thank you so much, Gene Luen Yang, for making Berkeley's education even more brilliant than it was ever before with your contribution. And so many students here and other members of the public really were deeply inspired by your words and by your work. And let us know how we can continue this. We'll do some comic panels as a response to your work and your talk today. And we'll send them to you if you want to comment on them. It'd be great to hear back from you. But thank you so much.
Yeah, I'd love to see them. Thank you so much. Thank you, Greg. Thank you, Edgar, Hala, everyone. Thank you so much for this. It was amazing. Wonderful to spend time with you all. Thank you.
Thank you, and all the best to your family. Take care. Bye.
All right. Stay safe, everyone. Bye-bye.
Yep.